In this edition of Wellbeing at Work, how should teachers cope when their relationship with colleagues is strained to breaking point? We'll be telling the true story and hearing the actual words of a teacher who was left feeling intimidated and isolated at work. As the events unfold, our experts will provide guidance on responding to the situation and dealing with the stress. They are Hannah Essex from Teacher Support Network, Victoria Galbraith, a counselling psychologist, and Richard Gerver, a head teacher turned education and creativity consultant. If you're watching this on the Teachers TV website, there's direct access to extended discussions and extra video tips from the panel. Although the dramatisations in this programme are based on a true testimony, we're not, of course, using the actual people or school involved.
I'm sorry to say that I've left teaching. It was always my ambition as a child to be a teacher, taking great inspiration from those who taught and inspired me. I ended up at a school not far from my own and enjoyed nearly 20 years of teaching. Now I feel entirely betrayed.
Oh, bottom.
My difficulties began when a new head teacher arrived.
Carry on.
From where you left off, please. Change was certainly needed. The school had become lacklustre, too reliant on old ways of doing things. Nevertheless, this new head was young, and I believed had been over-promoted.
Tom Snout, the tinker.
The first thing that troubles me about that clip are the actions of the head teacher and the way they came into that classroom and the effect, actually, that that teacher's reputation and position and standing would have in the school community and particularly with the children concerned.
The trade unions have all raised concerns about observation and how that's used in schools, and it can be really beneficial to help people to improve their practice, but it has to be agreed with the staff how it's going to work and what the benefit of it is, rather than it being seen as a sort of a disciplinary measure almost of going and checking up on teachers. There are cases where school leaders and those in management positions can portray behaviour which can be perceived as bullying behaviour, and often it's unintentional. With this case, it seems very much as though this person's been particularly targeted.
Bullying is often associated with physical threats or assault in some way, but in fact that's not the case. It can be much more hidden than that, much more covert. So a person can really suffer from that covert message that's being given to them.
I found myself isolated from the head teacher and the group of colleagues most vocal about her methodology.
I knew you'd be there. I want a full departmental review.
Expectations placed upon me became increasingly unmanageable.
Report for your gift.
I accepted that my responsibilities extended beyond teaching Shakespeare, but now nothing was ever good enough.
Be in my office at 4 this afternoon.
I was repeatedly called to discuss my situation with the head.
I need to make some radical...
On more than one occasion, she raised her voice that genuinely terrified me. She used to say I was...
out of the last century.
Even my dress sense was dismissed as...
so old and crusty.
There's often the need in schools to change and to modernise, but the way to do that is to encourage people, to get people on board, to get people to buy into why this change might be necessary and guide them through the process, rather than just picking away at the things that you don't like. Actually having constructive conversations is a much more appropriate way of handling this kind of situation.
Yeah, and perversely, of course, the head teacher's actually exacerbating the problem through their actions. The outburst in the staff room is going to undermine that teacher's self-confidence. Often if a teacher is struggling, it's because they have a lack of confidence, a lack of understanding in their role or their job at that moment.
That's right. If somebody is feeling a threat to their self-confidence, the last thing that they need is further threat. So knocking their self-esteem, knocking their self-worth, knocking their professionalism, feeling incapable of working at an appropriate level to function. So it's appalling in many ways that this person is led to feel like this.
There's no legal protection per se against bullying, and it very much comes down to the perception of the people who are involved in the situation. So one person's bit of friendly banter can be taken by the other person as being bullying behaviour. But there are actions that can be taken, and if this teacher ended up leaving the school, then they could potentially put the school in a situation where they could have a case of constructive dismissal because they've been forced out through the behaviour of the head teacher.
And I suppose also, if it is the case that this teacher is underperforming and struggling professionally, and the teacher has to be taken through a competency procedure, the head teacher's actions have actually prejudiced the case to such an extent that it would mean that even objectively that kind of process would be virtually impossible.
I had no colleagues to whom I thought I could turn for support. I was deliberately excluded from conversations. Social events suddenly seemed more secretive.
It would seem to me it is an incredibly unhealthy working environment. The head teacher is perversely setting up a whole manner of problems that they're going to be accountable for and have to deal with based on some ill-thought-through actions.
The last thing that sometimes people think of when they think of a school is that it's a workplace, and therefore the employees, the people who work there, the teachers and all the other staff deserve some attention being given to their health and their well-being. There must be policies and procedures in place to ensure that these kind of bullying behaviour can't happen and that there's ways of tackling it. But more than that, it's about the culture that's created by the head teacher, because if people look to that as the example of how to behave, then that means it's going to just cascade through the staffing structures, and that behaviour will be replicated and affect other people as well.
And also, I was just going to pick up on that and say that actually, you know, if it is the head teacher that is doing the bullying, as we're seeing in this particular case, then, you know, all of that head teacher's staff are going to want to be seen in a good light. And if the only way to be seen favourably is to collude or to engage in the same behaviour that the head teacher is engaging with, then that causes a real discomfort, I think, for many of the teachers in that particular school. And I think the staff room itself can be a very isolating place to be if you feel on your own.
Oh, bottom. Oh, what changed? What do I see?
All right, settle down. I think we've heard enough bottom jokes. The pupils, of course, picked up on my isolation. Even the most gifted and reserved students started misbehaving, with me as the target of their jibes.
You see an asshead of your own, do you?
An asshead of an English teacher.
One of the things we underestimate is that we think the children aren't going to pick up on this. And of course, children are incredibly perceptive, and they are very, very skilled at reading body language and hearing gossip and rumour and detecting what's going on below the surface.
A huge amount of the way that we communicate is through non-verbal behaviour, otherwise known as body language. And if a teacher is coming across as somebody who is quite anxious, quite stressed, perhaps not quite feeling themselves, this is highly likely to be communicated to the pupil so that they do pick up on it.
I think also what strikes me and worries me up till now in the scenario we've been watching is this teacher, for whatever reason, still hasn't sought help. You know, this teacher is still kind of drowning under this increasing pressure of isolation, of bullying.
They absolutely have to find someone to confide in. They really should speak to their union representative, because this could progress further and put them in real difficulty. But also finding a friend, a colleague maybe, someone, a family member or a professional support service where they can just speak about it, because only then will they be able to find a way through it.
And also for them to feel that they're not actually on their own, because we're all social beings. We all want to feel part of a group. We all want to feel belonging in a group.
It's a little thing, but I had a chair in the staff room which had been my chosen place to spend breaks for some time. Everyone knew. The head placed a poster on the notice board. There was no doubt in my mind who she was getting at. It became so unbearable that I found myself almost in tears before every day, having to park around the corner and compose myself before going into school. It was all too much. I loved the profession, but at what point do you say enough is enough?
It's such a shame he didn't find some way of staying in teaching, of finding some help, of speaking out and getting the support he needed. This happens all too frequently, where really good, talented teachers who dedicated their lives to the profession find that they leave under really bad circumstances. If he'd managed to speak out earlier on, there may have been a way of getting him the support he needed to stay in the profession.
Little things like the fact that he felt very strongly about his chair in the staff room shows that he's very much got the mentality of a teacher from a bygone age. But that's not to suggest or say that he doesn't have huge value if he was supported well enough.
That chair was perhaps a place of security, a place of safety, a place where they felt quite secure. Whereas in other places within the school or within the staff room, they didn't necessarily get that same sense of security. And I think that's a really important point, that once that's gone, that seems to be the last straw, really, I think.
Inevitably, people get into habits over a long period of time. They have their little foibles about particular chairs or what have you, and perhaps that needs to be challenged. And if this head teacher had just been a bit more constructive, sat down and had an honest conversation with the teacher, then this could have all been avoided.
That word you've just used is so important here, that honesty, the confidence to be able to be honest. And I think it's really important that colleagues that find themselves in a similar situation don't feel that expressing their concerns and their frustrations honestly to somebody is seen as a sign of weakness, that actually it's a very powerful position of strength.
I think that's absolutely key. I think gaining the support early on could have prevented a roller coaster of events from occurring. I think the earlier that a person gains that support, the better the outcome will be.
One strategy would be to write down their feelings in a letter, but maybe do it a couple of times. You know, so the first time is like an outpouring of their emotional response. When they've got that out, then rewrite that letter from an objective standpoint and send it or deliver it to the head teacher or their senior line manager. Because often that way can be an effective first step in breaking the ice, breaking down the barriers and beginning that conversation.
And it may be that that head teacher hasn't realised the impact of their behaviour, that it's something that's happened because of the pressure they're under, and actually seeing it in black and white might help them to realise, actually, what effect am I having on this person? Is there another way I can deal with this?
I think the black and white thing is very important. I think often if you're actually having a one-to-one conversation with somebody, it can be very, very difficult to articulate exactly what's going on, exactly how you're feeling. But putting pen to paper can have a very similar outcome, but in a better way for many people, because they feel that they can actually write down what's happening, and that can come across very, very well in a letter.
And of course, what it does is achieve what we've been saying all along, which is get involved in an interactive, mature and professional conversation. Well, we must end the programme there, but please don't forget that you can see extended versions of our conversation and extra advice from each of us on the Teachers TV website at teachers.tv/wellbeing.